The audio is still going to be the same as last week.
Audio is still
Same as last week.
audio is still
Same as last week.
audio is still
Same as last Dude.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, you've tuned into the second episode of Greatest Hits by the Hundreds on the Hundreds TV. My name is Justin. I'm here with Bobby Hundreds, Chief Creative Officer and founder of the Hundreds. What's going on, Bob?
Hi.
How
I
are
like how you started it off by saying you've turned into the Greatest Hits show. We've all become the Greatest Hits show, but you've also tuned into the Greatest Hits.
That's how submersed into the archive I am.
You're
I turned in.
starting to slowly morph into this show.
Okay, so each week you can tune in with us. Tuesdays here, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And each week we're going to be pulling out timeless classics out of the Hundreds vault and telling you the designers and the creative process and the stories behind those pieces. You will also be able to tune in to our chat room and ask us questions about anything, about the brand, about streetwear. You can ask Bobby anything. You can ask me how I get so much volume to my hair. Anything at all. Anything
I've been
you want.
curious.
You know, it's a secret, and maybe we will reveal it today. And then the really cool thing about this is all of the products we will be going over are one of one and will be for sale on the shop tab for the Hundreds Greatest Hits. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, to the Hundreds TV.
And thank you to anybody that tuned in last week and also made a purchase. We almost sold out. We have a few pieces from episode 1 still available, but just to let you know, we were gonna go over this tee,
Okay. Yeah.
Fear of a Barack Planet, but it already sold out.
Did it really?
It already sold out.
So this just went up for sale right now. As you're watching the Hundreds TV, you can buy as we're watching this, and I guess it just went up for sale. Already sold before the show began. But cool.
So, Bobby, I want you to set the stage for us a little bit. The election of Barack Obama. Right?
Yeah.
So one thing I think is really interesting is, the timeline of the Hundreds was very in tune with the Bush administration.
Yes.
And, everything from music to streetwear was very anti-establishment, anti-war on terror. And maybe just kind of speak a little bit of how streetwear has always kind of been able to contribute to that narrative, and also kind of what you were trying to interpret with this t-shirt.
Yeah. It's funny when people say that, the Hundreds has gotten more political, or they'll say, I wish streetwear wouldn't get into politics, stick to fashion, stick to streetwear, where a lot of our genesis and the foundational trimmings of what made streetwear, and especially a brand like the Hundreds, came from being politically involved and being more activist aware. And I reflect back recently where I said, if anything, we've actually gotten less political in our messaging over time, just because we have so much more product and we make so much more stuff that there's only so political I can get on a pair of jeans or like a outerwear jacket, even though there are ways to even make those political statements in themselves. But our foundations were rooted in this stuff. I've been very politically engaged since I was an early teenager, and so the brand came from that. If you look at a lot of our early T-shirts, even the stuff that we have displayed here for Greatest Hits, these aren't random or by accident that we chose some, in some ways, inflammatory graphics. That's just what it looked like back then from the Hundreds, and it wasn't considered even as controversial. It just was what it was. Like, people were very much okay with your politics, or if that's what you want wearing a shirt at school now, because our politics have become so intertwined with our identities. People take very high personal offense to something they don't agree with, or they embrace it more than they ever do. And so some of the political graphics we made way back then, even though they were popular, I think are more popular now, at the same time more hated now. And so it's just interesting to see how the culture has shifted around a lot of that language and visual representation over the years. So having said all that, this shirt, what year was this? Do you have that?
2008.
So 2008, so Barack's about to be elected. A guy that we knew back then named Paul, he was actually a Korean American dude. He had a brand called Future Relic, and a small time streetwear indie brand that I don't believe exists anymore. They had a few hit t-shirts back then. Paul freelanced this for us on the side, and I have to give the credit to him. I think it was entirely his concept, but it was inspired by Fear of a Black Planet, and I loved it. I loved his concept because you could take it both ways in the sense of I was a Barack supporter at that time. I still am, but at that time I was a big proponent for Barack Obama, and this was to address the fact that there was a lot of hesitation and fear of the unknown, up until this guy was running and actually very close to that election. Most Americans had no clue who Senator Obama was. It's almost like he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. He was groomed to be the presidential candidate. He just started killing and crushing in all the debates, and then people fell in love with him. But we were Democrats and Republicans were very, I guess, just in wonderment of who this guy was, what he could possibly do, and then obviously on the Republican side of things, there was a lot of fear and trepidation and opposition to someone like him coming in. But even for someone like me to see a person of color being potentially the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, at the same time also being a black man, that was like a really, really big deal. And politics have always been polarized in a way, but that was the beginning of some what we understand politics as today is like an extremely polarized game. So I don't know, there was just like a lot of fear, a lot of wondering, a lot of questioning on what he was going to bring to the table, and that was just the climate back then. It was like a lot of unpredictability.
A lot less unpredictable than today, though.
Yes. Yes.
Now it's like playing roulette every morning.
Yes. Every hour.
Every hour of every day.
Just wondering why your phone is blowing up and what else fell apart. Very anxiety weird.
So this was for sale on Greatest Hits, but it has sold out. So make sure you tune in right at 4 to make sure you get all the new pieces. Rosewood Collection.
Oh yeah, it is Rosewood Collection too.
Yeah. And last episode, you told us that Rosewood Collection was...
Yeah, Rosewood Collection was a collection that we still do, technically, even though the store's not open, just for our store on Rosewood in the hundreds of Los Angeles. The shirts were only available inside that store. You couldn't even buy them online. So in a weird way, even though it's been 12 years, that's the first time the shirt's ever been sold online. It was never available in the online shop. You had to actually physically go to the store if you see Rosewood Collection.
And that kind of goes back to, I think, what is a pillar with the hundreds is the very experiential element of the brand.
Yeah.
Like everything from like the nitpick details of all of the stores, to Santa Monica being like kind of everything has its own like character. The old Santa Monica store had its like painting characteristic, right?
Yeah.
SF was influenced by the Lost Boys because you guys kind of felt, well, now we're in this crazy shopping district in the SF. We kind of feel lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just like I love how you guys kind of speak towards that narrative always. So with that said, you guys had
good segue.
You guys had SF.
So our first store was in Los Angeles on
LA.
Rosewood,
Yeah.
Rosewood, and then San Francisco on Post and Taylor and Union Square. And then the third store that we worked on while San Francisco was opening up was New York.
Okay.
On Grand between Mercer and Green, I believe. Oh God, Broome. Sorry, Mercer and Broome. Yeah. Wow, it's been a while.
All right,
so 96 Grand Street.
96 Grand Street, just like again, set the stage, Bobby.
Yes.
So how did the New York thing like even initially come up as a conversation?
Man, at that time in fashion and in streetwear especially, the goal was to have your own brick and mortar flagship store. And so we accomplished that with the LA store in 2007. Yes, 2007, yes. And then in 2008, we opened San Francisco, which was something that we just wanted to see how well we could do outside of our hometown. San Francisco had even more energy, and we had an even thicker community there, which we still do. We still get so much love from our Bay Area family. But to us, those were low-hanging fruits because LA was in our backyard. San Francisco's still on the West Coast. We're like, that's easy.
Street.
It's up the street. 6 hours up the street. But if we can hit New York, which is an entirely different animal, if you know, you understand the difference between East Coast and West Coast. They are practically different countries, different worlds. Especially to survive and to excel in the New York marketplace was, man, you were kings if you could do that. So that was kind of like, this was like, LA was like Mighty Ducks 1. We're playing like a local hockey team.
Yeah.
And then like, I think in D2 they were playing like the Olympics.
And the Olympics are still in California.
It's still in California. And then number 3 was like Iceland, or they call it Iceland,
Yeah.
but like, so it was like, oh man, like this is big leagues. Like the players are huge, and all the competitors are so good.
So kind of in addition to talking about the players in New York, so what were some of your biggest New York inspirations? I'm talking people, I'm talking places, I'm talking things, I'm talking food.
As far as who we looked up to, A-Life was my favorite store. Still, if you ask me what was my favorite retail experience in all of streetwear history, I'd say A-Life was up there for me. Very close second, and Ben's number 1 is Sir. So Russ's store, Sir. The original Sir shop, especially, there was Sir Plus, and then there was another Sir store, but the Sir stores were always kind of a benchmark. We just have so many memories with New York, with the places that we eat. La Esquina was like the spot for like, early on, and then I don't know. I mean, we can go on and on to even like David Chang's restaurants, but we all had like our spots. I like Little Frankie's, I still do, the lemon spaghetti. So New York was like this thing for us, especially coming from LA. We've always aspired to visit New York, right? Like LA people love visiting New York, like the idea of it. Now to have an actual store there was a really big goal of ours, and then we got there in 2010, 2011, something like that.
So this t-shirt is from 2010.
Yeah.
Which is, and if you're just tuning in, you are watching Greatest Hits on the Hundreds TV. We're here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Just talking about New York with Bobby Hundreds, we're going to continue. So one thing about, so I'm from Virginia, East Coast, right? I went to an art school.
Yep.
Big art school. Everybody goes to New York.
Yeah.
You can take an Amtrak up there in 6 hours, right? But we did not know, like nobody my age like knew about Los Angeles for real, right?
Yeah.
You knew it was like the city, there's like a couple million, whatever you knew Hollywood.
Right.
But the extent of like streetwear was one of the main proponents of connecting East Coast and West Coast culture. Even more so than music in a lot of ways for me.
Yeah.
Because I was working on the website at Round 2, and I was very familiar with a lot of East Coast brands. And I had like known of the Hundreds, but then I remember some of my coworkers came back to Virginia with like a bunch of gear that they had thrifted and stuff, and all of the stuff they had bought. And I was like, the Hundreds.
Yeah.
Right? So I was wearing like the Stan Smith with like fucking Ben's face on
Yeah.
it and shit, and now like working for the man.
Yeah.
It's funny. But I definitely think like, in terms of stylistically, like they just kind of complement each other super well.
What does?
New York
and LA?
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you're talking about style and function and whatnot, New York fashion is more functional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Los Angeles is more of an extension of your personality, your mood, your soul.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I just think it's too.
Yeah.
And if you even look back at some of the pieces that the Hundreds was making, you guys are making like a whole like down coats and stuff that's very functional.
Yeah, well, a lot of that came by way of just us having a store in New York.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, and I grew up in Southern California, so my idea of cold goes to like a pretty thick coach's jacket, right? Like that's as cold as it gets. And so to design a technical outerwear piece that is built for, 0-degree weather and snow, like we couldn't even think that far. Us having a store in New York and spending so much time out there, we had an apartment out there for a while, living there. We were like, okay, this is why our store buyers on the East Coast are always telling us, you need to make better jackets. This is not Southern California. We're like, oh my God, like 40 degrees is freezing for us, in Southern California. We're like, no, it gets like negative out here. Like, so us experiencing New York weather is what ups our outerwear game and our jackets and our winter wear. So, yeah.
And so you have an article on the blog from 2014, and you're talking about why you wanted to open a store in New York. And I picked a quote that I really, really liked. You said, "The church isn't the building; it's the congregation."
Yeah.
Right. So the church isn't the building; it's the congregation. And you were referencing that to New York is full of these buildings, full of these stores, but it's not the stores that make New York; it's the people inside the buildings and the stores that make.
That's true.
And so I was just kind of wondering, can you elaborate on the sense of community and streetwear in New York being a sacred space?
Yeah, New York's streetwear community has always been obviously like it's lifeblood. It's what has drawn us to it. It's what's kept it really alive and vibrant. I don't think of brands. I think of people behind brands. Like I don't think of Project Dragon. I think of Future and Stash. I don't think of, when I even talk about A-Life, I'm thinking about, the first time I walked into the original space on Orchard Street, and not even Rubicon, but on Orchard, looking up and seeing like Tony Arcapasio and Jess like working on the studio. Arnaud was up there. So, the community is first and foremost most important, and we knew we had an audience in New York. We didn't necessarily have like a really huge customer base that the same that we had here in Los Angeles and Southern California. But we knew we had an audience for it because when I was blogging, I knew who was reading the blog. And, we didn't have a lot of e-com going on back in those days, but we knew that we were getting orders from out there. And so, the community was always front and center.
Okay, cool. And then also just kind of referencing back to that blog, I was just thinking about this. You posted a photo of Rustin Daughters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing I really like about New York is that you really don't get in Los Angeles, because if you look into the urban development and the fact that Los Angeles was one of the first cities developed around the automobile, you've lost a lot of very early history. You've lost the history of the late 19th century. You've lost the 20s architecture that used to be. So much stuff. Downtown and the 101 kind of like erased all of that. But one thing about New York is it's so true to its roots that even a place like Rustin Daughters that has the original floor tiling with the same people that have been weighing and cutting smoked salmon for years. And so I just feel like streetwear comes from New York because it's just so heavily rooted in like that urban tradition. And so I was thinking about that, and that's always what I thought. I always thought the root of all streetwear was the five boroughs, the 70s, the B-boys, the hip hop days. But then last episode you were talking about it's debatable that the original streetwear influence could be traced back to Sean Stussey's influence by board shapers.
Right.
And so then I realized, oh wait, Los Angeles and New York have always been these separate worlds that are like unconsciously connected.
Yeah.
Because you can draw inspiration from here and from New York. And
that's a good point. Yeah.
So stop all this New York versus LA debate. We're all united in this.
Intertwined.
We're all intertwined. All right, so this is for
Wait, we didn't even tell the story.
We didn't tell the story, but we got so caught up.
I'll tell you a really quick story about this. So as we were gearing up to launch in New York, we knew, and especially at that time, speaking of New York and LA tension, New York streetwear had very much its own identity and circle and community. LA also had its thing, but they didn't necessarily play well with each other. In fact, Supreme didn't have a store in LA at that point. No, of course they did, because LA was. So New York Supreme had just opened up their store in LA, which it felt really foreign. And to me, that's when Supreme changed, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, is when it opened an LA store. I was like, it's such a New York thing. it'd be like if Russ and Daughters opened up on La Cienega or something. That's not the same. But for an LA brand to open a store in New York it made a lot of noise and it caused a lot of commotion. And so there was grumbling happening within the community. The streetwear community was so small and tight at the time, and very dog eat dog. There were only so many brands, there were only so many people consuming this stuff, and so there was chatter.
They were mad.
They were mad. There was chatter. And so to take the piss out of them and to really take the wind out of their sails, I was like, why don't we do this campaign called Keep the Hundreds Out of New York? And we plastered these signs all across the city of Manhattan. We pasted it everywhere. We also made stickers that said Keep the Hundreds Out of New York. And we made these stickers of Atom Bomb and Bar logo where it looked like they'd already been torn off. They were like tree torn, and then we posted those everywhere so it looked like someone had gone around and was like ripping our stuff down. And there were some haters in the community. I won't even name names, but if you look up on the blog, I named who those names are. But there were haters within the community that were happy to see this happening. They didn't know that it was us behind it. And so we were orchestrating all the hate ourselves. And so building up to it, people were like, man, yeah, that's right, keep the hundreds out of New York. Yeah, they don't belong here. And someone told me that they were wearing this shirt and a New Yorker walked by and was like, I don't even know who the hundreds are, but I want them out of here. You know? And so we were stirring the pot ourselves. And then when we opened the store on opening day, we made the announcement of like, this is ours. We printed it on a t-shirt. If you're one of the first people in line, we're gonna give you this shirt. So this is incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. It has so much storytelling to it.
So yeah, you can buy this piece from 2010 for $100 on Greatest Hits.
What size is it?
So
Honestly, I might end up keeping it. Unless someone buys it, so.
okay.
That's
So
good.
beat Bobby to the punch.
Yeah,
guys.
beat me. We can make to the people that end the show.
All right, let's just keep the controversy going, man. Let's keep it going. Hip hop is dead. So this clearly comes from Punk's Not Dead,
Yes.
which is the Crass,
Different. Yeah.
which, if you're into punk rock, is an anarcho-British punk band from the 70s. Go check them out. They got low-key only got like 5 good songs. Anyway, so hip hop is dead. So you reimagined this idea that, you know, punk's not dead, it's resilient, right? But
Right.
hip hop was ever changing in the period, the transition of 90s to 2000s.
Yes.
Probably one of the most transformational periods.
Very
in
volatile
music.
time in music.
You know what I mean?
general.
Like,
Yes.
it was really stopped being about the album, the lyrical content, really started being about like how much money did you drop on the video,
Right.
which is kind of where, you know, post Tupac, post like Death Row Records, LA kind of needed some juice.
Yeah. Yes.
It needed
Yes.
some hip hop juice, and
Yeah.
that's like kind of where I think the commercial aspect of like hip hop kind of just birthed.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, every music video was shot here. And I was from Virginia, seeing why I was like, where does the sun shine like this?
Yeah, yeah.
All Southern California.
Yeah.
Everybody's there.
It's a good point.
So hip hop is dead,
Yes.
right? But the back is what's important.
Yeah. All the fallen MCs, all the legends
Right?
at the time, and they were kind of stacking up.
And
you
so
know,
Bobby also, this T-shirt was made in 2004, right?
Yes.
So this, if you think about where design technology has come since then,
Yes.
you could just make all this on a computer, but that's not exactly what you did with how you came up with this.
No.
Right? So what was your design process to kind of make the back of the shirt?
Right. So as we were talking about, Punk's Not Dead was a thing. I grew up in the punk scene, and I was watching this happen to hip hop music and culture at the time. It was something very sacred and underground to us, and it was starting to get very processed and manufactured and marketed in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. And so instead of writing Punk's Not Dead, I flipped it to Hip Hop is Dead, or Punk is Dead to Hip Hop is Dead. And then on the back, hip hop was literally dead in the sense that within a span of a few years, we had lost a lot of these great rappers that I had grown up listening to and idolizing. The same with Ben. So Tupac, Eazy-E, Big L, Big Pun, Jam Master Jay, and Big. And then I wrote this like paragraph underneath, which is kind of like a foreshadowing of what a lot of our work consisted of, was tied back to my writing. And so I talked just about mass commercialism happening within our subcultures and what that was about. But we didn't have Google Images even running at that time, and if we did, there weren't images that were high res enough to where you can print them on a shirt and they look good, like a 300 dpi massive image. So to find photos like that, you had to actually go to the physical library. And so I would go to libraries around Los Angeles and sit in the stacks, pull out old Source magazines and Vibes or whatever, all the graphics from that era. I did the same thing. I was sitting in the library for like days at a time and just tear out pages, scanning things, folding papers, like sticking them in my pockets and running them to scan them. But that's how all these photos came about, was I literally had to pull them from magazines out of the library. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to get as good of a detail on those photos.
Okay, so talk about the weird uproar and yet embrace of this t-shirt and what it also did for the brand, because
Yeah.
I see this as a milestone for them.
This was a big one. This was probably our first really big hit on the mainstream level, in a way where Kanye was asking about this shirt. And Dame Dash, my friend worked for Dame, and he wore the shirt in front of Dame, and Dame like hated it. Just like, who's saying that hip hop? So who are these guys, the hundreds? And it was just Ben and I at the time, just making this stuff out of my apartment, and just to know that a message that we were putting out was getting that much traction out in the universe with like high profile people. That kind of like said a lot to us. It was our first shirt that we remade. This is the navy colorway, but the very first colorway was black. Then the time we ran it, we ran some brown ones, and then the third time we ran some navy blue ones, which is why there's a navy blue in here. But we ran it a few times up until that point. We only just made shirts. That run was it. If it sold out, it was gone. But this was so successful for us that it generated so much money. At the time, it was a lot of money. Probably not so much in comparison to today. But, that kind of fortified our business for that year.
Okay. And so, were you guys at the office space on Rosewood?
No, this is...
Is this out the apartment?
This is out the apartment. Full on out the apartment.
And, that is like, streetwear has a similar trajectory where like, you were in the blog post that I was referring to where I got a lot of this stuff. You were talking about, no, actually, it's from your book. Sorry, you were comparing album sales and T-shirt sales, and charting on the Billboard charts and having a popular T-shirt kind of being similar, right?
Yeah,
and that's what's really, really cool about streetwear is you really see these come ups from like square one to like where brands go. So this is out of the trap. This is out the apartment, off the coffee table.
It really is.
It's like right off the coffee table. And now like we're discussing it 17 years later.
Yeah. I remember the cardboard stencils I needed to do that to spray on, and it's weird. It's been almost 17 years, and I remember clipping these characters out and drawing these arrows, this graffiti type of imagery, and like tracing over it in Photoshop and Illustrator. Yeah, I feel like I was just doing it, but so much has happened since then. So that's a little bit of a trip.
So this is so deep out of the Hunter's archive that it doesn't even have a tag.
Oh my god!
That's how out the archive it is. But this is for sale. Greatest hits, the hundreds. Check it out. Size XL for $125. Cool. So let's take the music trend. Obvious choice.
Yeah.
So one thing I think is so interesting about Nirvana and Kurt Cobain in general is how, and I don't want to say the most interesting, I think it should be acknowledged, how Kurt Cobain's influence was almost more powerful in the last 4 years.
Wow.
Than it was in the last 16, 20, I'd say.
Since his death?
Yeah.
Or even when he was alive?
So I'm saying since his death.
Okay.
I'm saying and I'm speaking to my generation. So
yeah.
What's really cool about Nirvana is the band's ability to like transcend generationally, right? So
Yeah.
you were around when these albums were
Yeah.
contemporary.
That was like my adolescence.
I was around where this is Nirvana's greatest hits.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
But if you think about, like, for instance, Kurt Cobain's sense of style being more accepted and being birthing more influence through rap than it ever really did in rock music.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of ways, because, for instance, there was only two people really blurring the lines between androgynous and feminine energy, like Dennis Rodman and Kurt Cobain, right?
Yeah.
That was seen as unacceptable when you go through music in the 2000s. And now with rappers like Young Thug, with rappers like Lil Pump painting their fingernails, they're not just wearing paint.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just think it's really interesting how Kurt Cobain's sense of fashion and style has just like kind of transcended generations. And just kind of on a music tip, this is a rip of the Nevermind record.
Yeah. The baby swimming towards $1.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like putting the naked baby on a shirt, so I just pulled $1 out.
$1.
That was kind of, I wanted to make a Nirvana rip. The lettering was so iconic, but the lettering on its own just wasn't enough to me. Today it might be, but it just wasn't enough to me, and I wanted a graphical element that was a nod back to the album cover. I didn't want to use the baby, so using the $1 on the hook, I was just like, it's Nirvana without me getting into any legal trouble, right? Like I didn't rip them, no one can come after me for appropriating anybody's rights. It's just enough of a reference to where people get it.
And that's kind of like, before I worked in streetwear, and I would see collabs, or I would see this piece is inspired by this part of real life. It's almost like a magician's secret. You don't really realize what goes into like behind the scenes collaborations.
Right.
When really it's just like, it goes back to licensing,
right,
and deal points and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, people kind of idolize, oh shit, it's this collab.
Right.
They're making this item I'm gonna buy.
Yeah.
When really on the back end, it's like, we licensed the creative assets and rights and interpreted it. And I feel like what you just stated is kind of like pulling the curtain back on like magic or streetwear.
Yeah.
Which is not to take down the legitimacy or creative intent of a license at all.
No,
I just think it's very interesting that a lot of these collaborations go back to like one of the most basic advertising principles.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And how we've gotten to like develop this entire industry and world over that. So can you just maybe talk about you're an OG punk rocker. How big was Nirvana's influence in the contemporary?
When I was growing up, it was big, but Nirvana was also so mainstream.
Yeah.
And that was also an era where the cooler kids were very sensitive to mainstream, even though we were cognizant of it and affected. Obviously, people were wearing flannel and washed denim and secondhand thrift store shopping.
You know what's also really ironic about grunge style being popularized to me is like if you've ever been to like a rural, like somewhere in Washington that is not Seattle, it's not like that was like a fashion choice. That's just like what
they were wearing. Yeah.
It's just like what stores sell.
Yeah.
It's not like everybody's like saying this crazy like
making a
statement with this worn out flannel and jeans, like, oh, that's what they had at the fucking outpost. It's just like that's also funny how it's like. But anyways, continue.
But I mean, we love Nirvana, and we knew all the styles of music. But if you were like an actual front-facing Nirvana fan, it's just like you're not that cool because they're so mainstream. It would be like it's different today. It's hard to relate to how culture is because it's cool to like mainstream stuff. But back then you just couldn't be into mainstream stuff, especially if you're a punk. You're like, oh, it's on the radio? No, it's bad. Like you can't listen to the radio. So that would be the equivalent today of like, I don't know, who's like the coolest, like I don't know who the coolest rapper is right now. Who's the coolest rapper right now?
I mean, I don't think any.
Moving on. Yeah, Uzi is on the radio sometimes, right? Like he has some mainstream hits, and back then people have been like, nope. If you want to listen to cool rap back then, it was hieroglyphics. You know, it was like just stuff that just didn't exist on the radio. Damn the automator.
And now it's
Kick the wall.
interesting because what you're saying is like, what's popular is what's also considered cool.
Yeah,
This has
exactly.
never
It's
happened.
never happened.
Never
It's not
happened.
supposed to be that.
It's
way.
not supposed
Yeah.
to be that way, and I think younger generations are really missing out on the key factor of self-exploration.
Yes.
And that's something that you can't even really like
Yeah.
relay because it just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing like the experience of discovering something on your
Yeah.
own and somebody and not having it's almost like this, you know, every artist of anything has an Instagram page, a Twitter page, this, that. There's so much information.
Yeah.
But like when we were coming up, it's like the information was much more like a funnel like going through a
Right.
funnel much more centralized where you really had to like look towards yourself to be like, do I like this? Actually like this? Or do I like it just because everybody else does?
Right.
Which is like no.
Yeah.
So the Nevermind Hundreds tee for sale on Greatest Hits. This is a size XL with the 2009 to 13 tag for 125 for sale. Maybe it did sell. I don't know.
Might have already sold.
Might have already sold. We're gonna check.
It says huge on that shirt and on Justin's shirt because that was an early tagline of ours, which we use sometimes, but the hundreds is huge. So the hundreds is huge, but also we would just then use huge as kind of its alias because the hundreds is huge. It's also every time you see that word huge, that's the hundreds.
And then fun fact in the UK, it says massive.
Just kidding. Massive.
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 All right, cool. So we're gonna look into our last T-shirt that's being featured, episode 2, Greatest Hits. I just think again, a lot of the narratives in older tees kind of still ring true to me, especially with like today's social and political climate, and with the way that a constitutional right of gathering and protesting is perceived in the media. I think this tee speaks very true to this. Also, this has the OG 2005 to 700s tag.
Wow.
Where you used atom bomb on the tag.
Double extra large. You can buy it right now on the website as you're watching
Yes,
this.
and this is
On the
dead
side.
stock. This is a dead stock tee from the vault.
Dead stock, never worn, and still crispy and bright white.
So yeah, I mean, Lady Liberty is being silenced. Kind of has a lot of political narratives at times today.
Yeah.
Any
I think what was happening in my head at the time was obviously I was very outspoken about my political beliefs, and I had a lot to say about the nation and the country and our leadership. And one of the common responses to that from an opposing side is, well, you just leave the country, or you're being anti-American, or you don't love our country because you are being critical of it. Or, I think this quote even goes back to Benjamin Franklin. I might be wrong, but to be critical of your country and its leaders is actually to be the most patriotic. That's the most patriotic thing you can do, is to question the authority, to question the laws, to question those in charge, because this is a democracy. The people are actually the ones in charge. And, it seems that we continue to lose sight of that, especially in our current political state, especially when we see militarized police on the streets, and we see an autocratic ruler out there gaining more and more momentum, and people being completely okay with that type of regime. My understanding and the prevalent understanding of what democracy is that the people are really the ones in power. And so to question, to challenge, to critique the government, to question the ideals that we stand on is to constantly make America better and to refine who we are as a nation and as a people. And so that's really where the idea for the shirt came from. On the back, it says, dissent is not disloyalty. And we use this tagline a lot. I still use it a lot. When we were working on that Black Lives Matter shirt with Pharrell and BBC, we were thinking of running that "dissent is not disloyalty" as one of our taglines for it. And the fire in the Statue of Liberty's torch has been extinguished, and that's what's making the clouds. And this back graphic was really difficult to make because the idea was to get this gradient effect in the lettering, so it looked like clouds, smoke, and then to run it off the bottom seam, which at the time was also very complicated. Screen printers didn't like to do that because running over the seams creates the paint to pool, and so this was difficult. The artwork itself was done by David Chun. David Chun was responsible for a few graphics at the time, at that period in the hundreds history that were very popular. One was also a pager, if anyone remembers that. But this one was probably his crowning achievement. Yeah, and no pun intended, but he did many, many renditions of this over and over and over again. The original idea of the shirt was one that I had done with like this upside down flag. And then we worked on this together, but it took many iterations. Yeah.
Cool. So this piece and many others are for sale now on the 100's Greatest Hits. Now you can catch us here every single Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And at 4 p.m., the website will be updated with new inventory and new products, and then we'll go through the highlighted greatest hits on this live broadcast. Thank you, everybody, for checking us out. Bobby, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, of course. And I hope some people cop some vintage tees. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. We will see you next week. I wonder if Drew did it in time.